just getting a feel for it here.
Yep, mics
Okay.
are on. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
I put you right where I said. All right.
Thank you.
make yourselves comfortable. And just in case you weren't aware, we do have restrooms both at the front of the building and here at the rear of the building. So. everyone, we're going to give it about 5 more minutes, so if you'd like to find your seats, that would be beneficial. If you have not yet submitted your questions, they need to be placed in the buckets up front. If you haven't put your name on your question, it's going to be really hard for me to call on you. So I encourage you to put your names on the questions so that we can get the mic to you so you can ask them yourselves. But we are going to be starting with the invocation in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can ask everyone to go ahead and take your seats so we can get started. We're going to start this evening with an invocation from Representative Mike Kingsley, shortly followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get things started.
Well, what a great turnout. Thank you. If you could bow your heads, please. Well, dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this wonderful evening that we can get together as a community, as a family that loves this city. We all do, God. And God, thank you that all the candidates will have peace and comfort and know that your will is going to be done, God. Thank you for their families and all the stress that running a campaign goes through, God, that you just bless them and bless this building and bless the people in it, God. We thank you for this wonderful night and just your blessing and hand upon us. Thank you, God. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Would everybody stand? I pledge allegiance Good evening, and thank you for coming. Welcome to the Lewiston Smart Proposition 1 and Candidate Forum. My name is Maureen Anderson, and I will be moderating this evening's forum. I'd also like to welcome everyone who is joining us virtually via our live stream. Lewiston Smart is dedicated to getting the voters the best information possible, and that is the purpose of tonight's forum. Although we're also running the No on Proposition 1 campaign, we wanted to give the opportunity to voters to learn about Proposition 1 in a neutral forum and give them a chance to meet the candidates and ask them questions directly. We hope that you find this forum valuable. I would ask the audience to please hold your applause till the end of each section, and tonight's forum will contain 3 separate sections. The first section will be the Proposition 1 with John Pernsteiner, the chairman of Keep Lewiston, supporting the yes on Prop 1, and Joseph Gish, the chairman of Lewiston Smart, supporting the no on Proposition 1. And this section is expected to last approximately 45 minutes. The second section will be the mayoral candidate section with mayoral candidates Wilson Boots, Bob Blakey, and Dan Johnson. We expect that section to last about an hour 15. The third section is going to be the informal section, with everyone in attendance getting the opportunity to mingle with the candidates and directly ask their questions. We'll be ending the forum and closing the doors at 9:30. Proposition 1 and mayoral candidate sections will start with an opening statement, followed by a question and answer period, and then concluding with a final statement from each candidate. The order of candidates for these opening and closing statements were determined at random using a number generator. Our audience members have submitted questions by filling out 3x5 cards and handing them over to the moderator. As questions are selected, we will be asking your name, and we'll have a wireless microphone available for you to ask your questions. If you prefer, I would be happy to ask your questions for you. Before we start our first section, I'm going to give you a brief description of Proposition 1 and what a yes or a no vote means. Idaho state statute requires that the language of the ballot read as follows: shall the city of Lewiston retain its organization under the council manager plan? This is simply asking if Lewiston should retain its current form of government, which is an elected city council that hires a city manager to manage the city of Lewiston's affairs. Lewiston's current mayor is appointed by the city council and is simply the chairman of the city council. A yes vote on Proposition 1 will support continuing Lewiston's current form of government. On the other hand, a no on Proposition 1 will end Lewiston's current form of government and change the city back to a mayor-council form of government, where an elected mayor manages the city of Lewiston. The elected mayor may hire a city administrator to assist him, but the city manager position itself will be eliminated. We're now going to begin our first section, the Proposition 1, with Mr. John Pernsteiner. He is speaking in support of a yes vote on Proposition 1. Mr. Pernsteiner grew up in the Valley, is an alumnus of Washington State University, and is currently serving as a Lewiston City Councilor. In his role as Senior Vice President for MC Burning Glass, he advises Fortune 500 companies on workforce planning and new site selection projects around the world. He's also been privileged to work with 30-plus states and over 200 cities in the U.S. on economic development matters. He's married to a St. Joe's nurse. He's father to 3 great kids, a volunteer coach, an elder in his church, and is an unapologetic cheerleader of Lewiston everywhere he goes. Mr. Pernsteiner, you have 4 minutes for your opening statement.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to come tonight. Thank you for participating in this discussion. As I've had the opportunity to talk with folks over the past few months regarding this proposition, there's obviously a demand for change, a desire for change. And so what I want to talk about tonight is, are the levers that we're pulling the right levers? And so there's a few categories or themes of frustrations that I'm going to try to address in 4 minutes, so bear with me. The first is that the valley is falling behind, right? Our population growth rate has often been compared with Moscow as supposed evidence that our quote-unquote anemic growth is tied to our form of government. But it doesn't take long doing any research to show that that form of government has that it does not have an impact on the community's growth, evidenced by McCall and Twin Falls. The fact is, the United States has just gone through the slowest growth rate in its history. The last 10 years was even slower than the 1930s. This demographic drought is leaving thousands of communities behind, and 53% of the US counties lost population in the last census. This is a national issue. When you do broader comparisons, you'll actually find that our region, it ranks in the top 20% of growth in the United States. Okay? But if these people are coming, then why are we still losing all these retail stores? It's often a theme. Let's just set aside the fact that the world has moved to online shopping in a big way. But when you actually talk to the companies that left this community, every single one of them, almost every single one of them that I've talked with, was profitable and thriving. Okay? It was national issues that drove these chain stores out of our region. This is not a Lewiston issue. It's a national issue. The second category I heard is a desire to have greater accountability for how our taxes are being spent. I'm going to submit to you tonight, this is not a form of government issue. It's rather a leadership one. If you don't like the budgets that have been passed, then changing your council is the best course of action. And you have a great opportunity tonight to meet so many different candidates to make that change happen. We get to vote on 4 seats, and we can and will overhaul this council. But changing forms of government doesn't just bring change, it actually exposes us to more risk as well. One study showed that council manager forms of government were 57% less likely to have corruption than a strong mayor form. This merely highlights that the structure of strong mayor gives us less accountability, not more. Lastly, so many people have talked to me about the fears of mask mandates and personal liberties being infringed on. We have had multiple mask mandate votes at the Lewiston City Council, and I voted no on every occasion. But if this is one of your concerns, I would submit that a strong mayor would actually cause this situation to be much worse. You see, had one of our current councilors been strong mayor, we would be in masks for the last 2 years, and there was proposals to shut down the mill, shut down SEL, shut down our schools, all to flatten the curve. Our council manager form of government actually gave us more sanity in the process, not less. And again, a manager never made those proposals. It was your council. I get the frustration. Trust me, I'm there. All right? And I'm not up here to tell you that a yes vote's going to cure everything and that this government is the perfect government. It's government. It's not perfect. But I'm someone who thinks that limiting the powers of our government is actually a good thing. Right? It means we are less likely to make radical shifts in unintended directions, and we get to let the free markets decide how to run a business rather than a strong mayor. So council manager forms of government give us stability, accountability, and experience that we need as a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Rensteiner. Mr. Joseph Gish is speaking in support of the no vote on Proposition 1. Joseph Gish graduated from Lapwai High School and is a Texas A&M graduate with a degree in computer science. He spent 21 years as a Navy pilot, retiring at the rank of commander, and served in Operation Desert Storm. He is also a retired Boeing engineer and manager and has led projects on the P-8A Poseidon, AWACS, and K-646 tanker programs. He is a former airline captain and is currently a corporate pilot flying out of the Lewiston Airport. He is the current chairman of Lewiston Smart PAC, the organization that collected the signatures that put the Proposition 1 on the ballot. Mr. Gish, you have 4 minutes for your opening statement.
Hey, good evening. As Mo said, I'm Joseph Gish. Thank you all for attending tonight. Lewiston does need change. 48 years ago, Lewiston changed to a council manager form of government. And from that point on, Lewiston's average growth rate declined from 2.8% to just 0.5%. Why does this growth rate matter? The City of Lewiston's annual budget is growing several times faster than the rate of its population growth, making each family's share of the city's taxes and fees larger and larger. Many of you have no doubt felt the pinch of these rising taxes and fees. Growth, along with spending restraint, is needed to reduce the burden of these taxes and fees. Lewiston's stagnant growth is caused by a lack of executive leadership, the kind of leadership inherent in elected mayor-council form of government. To illustrate the difference between these two forms of government, let's imagine applying Lewiston's current council-manager form of government at the Idaho state level. In this case, we would not vote for our governor. We would only vote for our state legislators, and they would hire a manager to manage the state of Idaho. If this were the case, we would lose the executive leadership of an elected governor, and the state legislator would have no operational checks and balances. An executive leader, whether it is a mayor or a governor, provides a leadership and vision to respond to the dynamics of an ever-changing economy. As a naval officer, I never issued a direct order. Leadership is not about telling people what to do. It is about getting the members of your team excited about a vision, setting policy for attaining that vision, and then letting the team come up with the innovative ideas that make that vision a reality. This is the type of leadership an elected mayor will bring to Lewiston. The type of leadership that will tackle the bold projects like fixing downtown infrastructure and opening its shuttered buildings with restaurants and retail stores. The type of leadership that will bring in businesses that will provide good jobs to our children so they don't have to move away to find work. The kind of leadership that will bring restraint to the growth of the city's budget and lower our taxes and fees. This type of leadership simply cannot happen, has not happened in the history of Lewiston's council-manager government. Why not? Well, how can a 7-member city council agree on a vision for the city manager to implement when Idaho's open meeting laws prohibit them from policy discussions outside a formal meeting? The city's manager is not an executive leader who implements his vision. He does not answer directly to the voters. He is a manager who implements the policies of the city council. He also controls the council's agendas. This catch-22 situation makes it very difficult for our city leaders to unify behind any vision other than the status quo. This status quo has stagnated Lewiston's growth for 50 years. Some have worried that changing to an elected mayor form of government will place too much power in the mayor. However, that is not how our constitutional form of government works. Currently, there is no operational check on our city council, placing too much power in this part-time legislative body and an unelected city manager. An elected mayor will not only provide the needed executive leadership, but will also provide the check and balance on the city council itself. Vice versa, the city council, with its power over the city code and the city's budget, will provide an operational check and balance on the elected mayor. This is the type of government our nation's founders intended for us to have. I urge you to vote no to the status quo by voting no on Proposition 1. Lewiston needs change, and that change is electing a mayor and bringing leadership back to the city of Lewiston. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We will now begin our question and answer period. I'm going to be asking the first question. Both of the candidates were appraised of this question prior to coming this evening. So they're going to get this one to start us off, and then the questions will be coming from the audience. So, first question. What is the biggest advantage to the citizens of Lewiston created by the form of government you are supporting? Mr. Pernsteiner, we'll start with you. You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. I truly believe that the biggest advantage is actually accountability. And I know that word's getting thrown around a lot here in terms of what that means. and I'll say it again, communities with a council manager form of government have been found to be 57% less likely to have corruption than strong mayor forms. This is a national study. And that alone should give you pause to consider the form that is around that. Okay, but our current form, we have some power in the city manager, but his autonomy is trumped by the council. Not nearly the same with a strong mayor. There's been a lot of comments made that current councilors are trumped by the city manager on what gets on an agenda, access to city staff, etc. I can only tell you as one councilor that has never been my experience in almost 4 years. But two, it also highlights one of the things I actually enjoy about our current form of government. No one person has authoritarian power. This is a limited government. The manager sets agendas and staff time in the direction of the council, not his own agenda. That's accountability and that's balance. By distributing the power among 7, we give our community a more even-handed approach to governance. This provides for greater stability in our city services, which makes for an easier environment to do business in, not worried about what's going to happen back and forth every 4 years with the mayoral election. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gish, you have a minute and a half.
Yeah, I addressed this, the answer to this question in my opening statement, and that is we will have executive leadership in Lewiston with an elected mayor-council form of government. But one thing that I didn't mention is that with a mayor, you will have a feedback loop that will let the voters have a voice in how the city is being run. A mayor has an open door policy. He's not going to turn away a voter. And he's there, he's a full-time mayor. He's there all the time. If you have an issue with the city, you go and you talk to the mayor that you voted for. There is nothing like that now. I've gone and talked to the city manager. He'll point me to the city council. And I'm not sure if any of you have emailed the city council, but usually it's Mr. Bradbury that emails back. And that's it. So people use their time in citizen comments to talk to the city council. And we've had some citizen comments that have gone for an hour and a half, 2 hours because of so many comments. And I want to hear, I want to show of hands of people that have talked in citizen comments. Okay, did you feel that the city council listened to you when, there you go. You have an elected mayor, he'll have to listen to you because he is elected by you.
Thank you. We're now going to be moving to our questions asked by members of our audience. If you haven't submitted your card and you have a question, we'll probably have a little bit of time, so you can raise your hand or you can come on up here and join me. Our first question is from Corinne Reedy. She asked this directly to you, John Pernsteiner. It says, in your printed statement, you mentioned the word corruption several times. Are you suggesting that there is current corruption in the city government? You have a minute and a half.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So one of the things I highlighted with that in terms of corruption, and again, this is a national study that was done across this, and I know there's been a little bit of confusion about one of the bullet points in that study that talked about elected mayors. And so just as a quick side, I actually spoke to the author of that study. And one of the things around that in the elected mayor portion of that is that it's a subset of elected mayors inside a council manager form of government. That's what that bullet point's actually talking about. So when we talk about looking at patterns of corruption, I'm not here to say strong mayor equals corruption. I don't think that's true. I think there are fine individuals who are mayors all over across the city. What I'm saying is that what it highlights is a question when people say this would actually give us more accountability. That would seem to indicate that that's not exactly true. If there's more potential for corruption in that form of government, then it in and of itself, by definition, is more prone, or I should say, is less accountable. So I think that when I talk about that, it's not to highlight anything about our current government, current individuals running for mayor, but that's what really this is all about. This is about the change, not so much what's happening today per se, but what are we setting ourselves up for in the future? You might like the candidates today, but how are you going to like the candidates in 4 years? Thanks.
Thank you. Since the question was not directed at you, Mr. Gish, you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, I went to the city council meeting and I urged Mr. Pernsteiner not to use this corruption issue as a political football. And I want to see the hands of everybody here who cares what an academic in an East Coast think tank thinks about a form of government not ever having visited Lewiston. Does anybody here raise your hand if you care about that person's opinion? That's what I thought. I don't care about that opinion, and I really don't think it should be an issue in this campaign.
Thank you. Our second question wasn't signed, so we're going to run with that, and it is directed to you, Mr. Pernsteiner, as well. It says, what is the current city manager's annual salary and benefit package, and why was that not disclosed in the statement put out by the city clerk? You have 1.5 minutes.
I will assume that the statement put out is speaking of the voter pamphlet that was mailed. And so, yes, that was both an opportunity for both sides of this issue to respond, and then we were given each other statements and had a chance to respond to those as well. The item that was listed in there in terms of salary and speaking to that issue was really in response to one of the comments that keeps getting brought up about how expensive our city manager is and that a mayor would save us a whole bunch of money. And so directly to the question, and forgive me, I don't know all the details. I know his salary is around $150,000 plus benefits on top of that. And so when you talk about a hired executive in that realm, one of the things that I do every day is work with companies on their compensation plans with their employees. And so as you look at a national landscape when you're recruiting, those are some of the salaries that you run into. So one of the things that was highlighted is we can get rid of this salary. But what we were trying to disclose is that now you have a salary of a mayor, and while it's not necessarily true, mayors have this discretion, but most often we find on top of that, you have a salary of a city administrator. And so those two combined really cancel out any sort of cost savings when it comes to the city manager's salary. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gish, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, I didn't hear what the mayor or the city manager makes. I think it's well over $200,000. I think it is comparable, if not more, than the governor of Idaho. I personally, with a $36,000 average salary that people in Lewiston make, I think it's too much. However, with that said, I don't think this should be about the city manager's salary. I think what this shows is that people are upset at that salary, and the city council that we have now doesn't listen to that. I think a strong mayor who is elected is going to be sensitive to the salary he makes because of the people voting for him. And that's another reason why we need to go to an elected mayor form of government.
Thank you. The next question comes from Veronica Reedy. Mr. Pernsteiner, again directed first to you. In your statement, you mentioned sharing of powers with 7 city councilors. What keeps 4 of them from colluding and doing something dangerous for the city, such as imposing mask mandates?
You do. I mean, at the end of the day, that's where we have that level of accountability. I mean, I can't agree more with that statement. Could 4 people change the direction of the city? 100%. 4 people could, and they did, right? So I'm in line with that question. And so, but every 2 years, you have the opportunity to disrupt that, okay, as evidenced by tonight. But what I'm curious with that question is, why does it seem less risky, or I should say, why does it seem more risky to have 4 councilors make a decision than 1 mayor make that decision? That to me seems extremely more risky when you talk about issues like this. So I think that this current form of government actually provides us that level of stability with matters like what was brought up here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gish, you have 1 minute to respond.
Actually, Idaho open meeting law would not allow people to collude in private. They would be breaking the law if that were the case. However, I do want to address the fact that a mayor is not a dictator. The city council has a check and balance on the mayor, just like the legislature would have a check and balance on the governor. So it's not like the mayor is going to just dictate that people wear masks. He can try that if he does, and the people don't want it. There is an avenue through the city council to rein him in, and also vice versa. The mayor can veto things that the city council does that he thinks is. That is the check and balance that we need in Lewiston today, and all that stuff happens in the open in front of the voters, and we're sorely lacking in that kind of transparency now.
Thank you. This question is also not signed but directed at you, Mr. Gish. One candidate for mayor has stated that one function he would do is take away business licenses for any business requiring a mask. Is this a power you foresee for the elected mayor?
Well, this is my personal opinion. It has nothing to do with Prop 1. Prop 1 is to change our form of government, but personally, I feel that that would be interfering with a business and their right to run their own business. I think there are probably people that would argue both sides of this. That's my personal opinion, that if somebody has a business and they want somebody to wear a certain uniform or wear a mask because they're cooking, that's between the business and the employee. So I would probably disagree with that.
Thank you. Mr. Pernsteiner, you have 1 minute to reply.
Yeah, Mr. Gish and I are on the same there. I think that one of the great freedoms that we have is when you run your own business is to run it the way that you see fit. That's the sort of personal liberty that is great in this country. But I do think that the question highlights, when it comes to this proposition, like, is that sort of power or freedom that a strong mayor could wield, and that's the sort of instability in terms of running your business that makes it a little bit difficult. So, yeah, I think at the element of do businesses have the right to, hire their staff accordingly? Yeah, they should have that right. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next question, also unsigned, directed to you first, Mr. Pernsteiner. Have city taxes gone up while you have been a councilor? You have 1.5 minutes.
I'm fine addressing that. I don't think that has anything to do with Proposition 1, though. But I have voted in all 4 years. I have voted for the levy rate to go down all 4 times. Has the levy gone up? Yeah, we've grown. But the levy rate, I've always voted for it to go down.
Thank you. Mr. Gish, 1 minute to reply.
Well, when I came back to Lewiston about 3 years ago, I remember, I haven't looked it up, but I remember that the city budget was $85 million. This year it's $110 million. It's about an 8% rise in the budget each year if you do the math on that. And the population isn't growing that fast. So these taxes and fees are going up. They have to, because each family's share of that budget is going up and up. And I really believe that an elected mayor who is elected directly to the voters, answers to the voters, will do something about those taxes and fees.
Thank you. I have one final question, and then we'll get to our closing statements. This is addressed equally to both of you. What would be your strongest argument in favor of the opposite form of government for which you're currently campaigning? Mr. Pernsteiner, would you like to go first? 1.5 minutes.
That was a great question. I don't know who sent that in, but I really like that. No, I honestly think the strongest, I'll take it back to my poli-sci days, poli-sci class. Professor gets up, says, the best form of government is a benevolent dictator, right? Someone who has all the power and authority and a golden heart. Absolutely, that would be incredible. But what happens when the next generation or the next person fits into that? All the power stays, but the heart may change. I'm not saying strong mayor's dictator. I'm not, by any means. But we're creating a level of autonomy now with this role that, as we've seen with executive roles all throughout at the state and national level, will inevitably end up on a side that you don't agree with. And so your recourse is to wait and ride it out. Whereas with the council form of government, we have more stability, and no one person gets to overhaul our city for their pet projects. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Gish, you also have a minute and a half.
Well, I'll use the language that the opposition has been using, in that if we hire a manager, the intent is to take politics out of the management of the city. And that is with the assumption that politics in the management of the city is a bad thing. I'm gonna rebut myself on that just because I can. I believe that politics is the feedback loop that we need back into our city government. And politics is winning votes to stay in office or win office. And that politics is the feedback loop that we're missing now. So I would say that the strongest argument by the opposition is one of the strongest arguments that I have for going to a strong mayor.
Thank you. This does conclude the question and answer period. Each side is now going to have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Joseph Gish, the no on Proposition 1 will start. Mr. Gish, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Okay, Lewiston has been governed by the council manager form of government for almost 50 years, and for that entire time has had rising budgets and stagnant growth. It is time for a change. It's time to bring executive leadership back into Lewiston. In just a few minutes, you will get to ask all 3 candidates for mayor what kind of executive leadership they will bring to the city of Lewiston. This is the type of dialogue missing from Lewiston's political discourse, and it is long overdue. I applaud all 3 of these candidates for stepping up to serve the citizens of Lewiston. However, Proposition 1 is about much more than these candidates. It's about having executive leaders step up every 4 years to win your vote by presenting their leadership and their ideas for moving Lewiston forward. It's about continuing to have town halls like this forum where you ask questions and present your views directly to the candidates. It's about government being accountable to you, the voter. By voting no on Proposition 1, you will ensure that this type of dialogue will happen every 4 years as Lewiston charts a different course for the future. We have a no booth over there. Please stop by our no on Proposition 1 table, and we will answer your questions and give you a sample ballot that explains and simplifies how to fill out the November 2nd ballot. I want to thank you all for attending, and remember, vote no to the status quo, vote no on Proposition 1. Or, if you like this one better, vote no and watch Lewiston start growing.
Thank you. Mr. Pernsteiner, 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to thank the moderator. I want to thank Mr. Gish for this discussion, and I want to thank you all for your questions around this issue. I believe we're at the precipice of some of the biggest changes our region has ever seen in our history. When it comes to our economy, when it comes to our population, when it comes to prosperity. I think Lewiston, is uniquely positioned to capitalize on the massive shifts we're seeing in America. I personally believe the council manager form of government best aligns with our values as a community, to have stability, accountability, and experience in our day-to-day services. I think it helps mitigate authoritarianism and protects our personal liberties better. I believe it gives us the best bang for our buck and brings efficiency to our community. Because at the end of the day, we want a city that our kids and grandkids want to stick around, right? I love Lewiston. I put that in my intro because I'm an unapologetic cheerleader everywhere I go, and people are honestly sick of it. I have traveled across the United States, gone to city after city regarding economic development issues, and I sit across the table from these community leaders as they talk about what they love about their community and the challenges they face. And every time I think, man, I love Lewiston. In my 4 years on council, I've been blessed to see story after story of neighbors helping neighbors through some of the most difficult times we've ever faced as a community. Stories of everyday heroes who volunteer their time, treasure, and talents to serve their friends and strangers. This really is my favorite place in the world. Whatever the outcome of this election, I'm grateful that you're here and that we're here. Even if we don't see eye to eye on this issue, I believe what we have in common is that we see this as a place worth fighting for. So I hope you vote yes, but I hope more that you take a moment and realize the reason you're here or watching online is because we both agree that Lewiston is a great place to call home, and the fact that we both care about that is what I call a win. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I would like to thank both Mr. Pernsteiner and Mr. Gish. We're going to be doing just a couple of minutes, a changeover from our Prop 1 to our mayoral candidates. I'd like to have the mayoral candidates take the stage. I know, we're high tech. Are you coming, Bob? We are now going to be beginning our mayor candidate section. The mayoral candidates are Mr. Wilson Boots, Mr. Bob Blakey, and Mr. Dan Johnson. Once again, all of the statements and the questions and stuff were through a random number generator, so no emphasis being given on one particular candidate. And with that, Mr. Boots, you will begin. Mr. Boots is a longtime Lewiston resident who is passionate about citizens' rights. Bob Blakey is running for mayor as well as the re-election to the Lewiston City Council, and Bob is passionate about public service and serving the citizens of Lewiston for the past 8 years. Dan Johnson is a longtime resident of Lewiston who has previously worked at the City of Lewiston and is currently an Idaho State Senator. Dan is passionate about honest and transparent government. The only way one of these candidates will become your mayor is if Proposition 1 is voted no on Election Day. We are going to begin our candidate section with a 4-minute opening statement from each candidate. And like I said, the order was determined by random number. So Mr. Boots, you have 4 minutes for your opening statement.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate being here. Happy to see everybody here. This is great. I'm actually going to change this up a little bit, and I'm going to talk about, just for a moment, Mr. Pernsteiner talked about that you have to wait 2 years, or 4 years, excuse me, to change mayors. That is not true. That is an incorrect statement. There is a recall process we have. So with Lewiston Smart, there was 2,000 signatures gathered. And I can tell you right now, if Mr. Nygaard would have been an elected mayor, we would be voting on his recall right now. Okay, so there is a process to get rid of a mayor that is doing a poor job, whether it be any one of us. And that's part of America, and that's the beauty of it, all right? That's part of, thanks. That's part of why I support it, and I support a strong mayor regardless of which one of us would be getting that. Even though that's hard to swallow, because I think they do a horrible job, that's the truth of it. That's the reality. But I believe in the strong mayor because it puts the voice and control back in the voters' hands. All right, so our nation is in trouble, okay? And our problems, the problems are being pushed down to the local level, okay? And our state is not, we're not being protected. And I am that candidate who will protect you, okay? I believe in individual liberty, all right? When you become an employee, you are not a slave. They do not have the rights to your veins, all right? This is very simple, basic. It's not limiting business. Why do we have 40-hour work weeks? Does anybody else want to work 7 days a week? Like the miners had to when their bosses said you got to work 7 days a week in the 1800s here in Idaho, 7 days a week, 10-hour days with an occasional Sunday off. I don't want to do that. I am glad we regulate that and we say, you know what, there's a limit, 40 hours, and then you're going to get some overtime. So there's reasonable limitations to businesses, all right? And right now you have two politicians that are career politicians, all right? Bob Blakey, I'm not going to talk about too much because he's in the city, he's given us what we have, he likes it, he wants to keep it that way. So he's convoluted, that's okay. That's his right. Dan Johnson has 10 years in the Senate, 10 years. 10 years. So we have a record. We don't have to even listen to what he has to say. We can look at his record. He voted to allow transgendered boys into our girls' sports. I don't need to know anything about the man other than that. Okay, as a father, as a husband, that makes me sick. All right, it's unacceptable. He was the only Republican in the House or the Senate that voted to not ban aspects of critical race theory in our schools and to give protection to our students. That's unacceptable, all right? And this is not some little side group, okay? This is the American Conservative Union. He'd like to downplay it. People want to downplay their rating. These are the folks who put on CPAC. This is the gold standard for conservatism. He has an F lifetime rating. Get the facts. I have them back there on the table. This is the truth. The truth matters. Enough BS. Enough BS from career politicians. I didn't want to be a politician. I was driven to this. I was driven to this because of the failures that we have seen. I will fight for you.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you have 4 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, and thank you for attending. 8 years ago, I ran for my first election. I think it's fair to say a lot has happened around us that none of us saw coming. When I first ran for office, I had high expectations for our city. 8 years later, I'm proud of what our city council has accomplished and my voting record. Among the highlights was the adoption of the Human Rights Ordinance. This includes also the voters approving a new water and sewer plant. Along the way, our streets and water lines have been fixed. Our sewers have been improved. I continue to strongly support our police and firefighters keeping Lewiston safe, and my voting record supports that. We settled a URA lawsuit, saving potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. And I continue to use this tool, or believe that we continue to use this tool for the city. And oh yes, let's not forget about COVID. After careful consideration and extensive discussion with health experts and Lewiston citizens, I voted for the mask ordinance. And I continue to believe that there is more that we can do to protect our citizens. Until COVID is held in check, we cannot have the school, the civic, and economic rebound we all desire. Very, very, very respectful.
Please allow the speakers to finish.
Shut up, Boots. What I've learned as an elected official, you have to plan for the future. It's fun to talk about tax cut and budget reductions. I call this living in the moment. But developing and preparing for the future is key. I will continue to promote the growth of our city. While national issues get press and media time, operating the city is about planning, strategic goal setting, and communicating with our citizens about what our basic needs are. When you wake up in the morning, you want your water to be running. You want your sewer to work. You want your city streets in good shape. You want clean parks, and you want to know if the fire department is called to your house, it takes less than 5 minutes for them to arrive. Those are the real issues. The rest is just noise.
Wow.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, you have 4 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mo, and thank you, Spartan Keep, for this opportunity tonight and for everybody involved, for your attendance tonight, too. It's very important that you're here. This is what makes up part of the American experience, so it's great. Thank you. On November 2nd, the people of Lewiston will be asked to elect a mayor. The prime responsibilities of that mayor will be to hire city employees, appoint officers such as the city clerk, treasurer, and attorney, subject to confirmation by the full city council, assist in the preparation of a budget, and other responsibilities granted by Idaho law and city council ordinance. I'm running for mayor, and I'm ready to assume these responsibilities to lead our city to a more prosperous future. I believe a mayor elected by the people is more efficient in performing these responsibilities, is more responsive to the people and their needs. As an elected public servant with 10 years of experience in state and local government, I always have my ear open to the voice of the people. But more than just these important responsibilities, the mayor is the executive leader of the city. An elected mayor provides a separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches of city government with appropriate checks and balances on each branch. For example, the council can deny confirmation of mayor appointments, and the mayor can veto council legislation. As presented by LCSC political science professors Dr. Kylie Britzman and Dr. Leif Hoffman, this separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches of city government provides healthy independence, debate, and creative tension. Separate legislative and executive branches provide the best opportunity for debate and consensus building. November 2nd, Election Day, and tonight also is a good day to have this debate and start building consensus. Let's debate vigorously, honestly, and respectfully. Open the strategic and budget plan for the city of Lewiston and take a trip with me through the neighborhoods and streets of our city. Do they meet with your expectations for the quality of life and cost of living? Drive down Bryden Canyon and observe the year-round trash along the side of the road. Walk down the sidewalk along 8th Street in downtown Lewiston and sidestep the overgrown brush. Count the number of dead and dying trees in our city parks. Open your utility bill and compare it to last year's bill. Are you on a fixed income? Can you afford another increase? Do these seem like small things to you? What do visitors and business owners see? Would they want to invest in our city? Do we adequately listen to our citizens' advisory groups? We must do the small things well if we want the people to fully trust us to do the big things well. My goals as mayor are to lower the tax burden, limit budget growth, reduce regulations, and take costs out of doing business. I know this is easier said than done, but it can be done, and it will happen if you elect me on November 2nd as your mayor. I promise to be your voice for better city government results for everyone. My final message to you is one of hope, that the city of Lewiston has a bright future and a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now begin our question and answer period. I will be asking the first question, followed by questions that have been submitted by the audience. This first question is directed at all three of you, and you will have equal time to answer. What will be the first 3 things you plan to accomplish as the newly elected mayor of Lewiston? Mr. Johnson, we will begin with you. You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mo. I have to tell you what I think the mayor's position is. I don't think it's an office position. I don't think the mayor, he or she, should just sit in their office and never see them. So on the first day of my service, I would actually be out on the streets of the city, talking to the people, walking the neighborhoods, going into the businesses, and finding out what it is that's important to them, to find out what we need to do to change. So that's the first thing I would do. It's hard to get a whole lot done on the first day, but I think there's certainly some things within the organization of the city that immediately would need to be looked at and talked about. And having worked for the city, I can say that fairly and honestly. I think thirdly, it's important to, we talk about the mayor establishing that political leadership for the city. I believe that's important for the city, and I think that can be a very positive thing to have that political leadership that the city lacks today. The mayor can go out there and be an advocate for the city and help make things happen in the city. So,
Thank you. Mr. Boots, your turn. 1.5 minutes to answer the question.
All right. Well, first and foremost, I'm talking to people now. I've been talking to people for 1.5 years because of our failed city government. And what I've been hearing lately, what I've heard this week, is about pregnant women in the bathrooms at SEL crying their eyes out because they don't know what the hell they're going to do between taking a vaccine and losing their job. It's here right now, folks. It's not somewhere else. It's not going to stop. This is a tidal wave. It was 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Now it's going on 2 years to flatten our economy and our freedoms. We have to take a stand, and we have to take it locally. I will do that. Obviously, Mr. Johnson hasn't even addressed it, doesn't even talk about it. Mr. Blakey, there's not a mandate that he doesn't like. Okay, I'm going to put forward ordinances to the council that I have to work with. They can veto it. We're going to work on it to protect employees. And yes, there will be fines for businesses if they try to override people's individual personal liberty guaranteed in the Constitution, okay? People have the right to their veins, and employees aren't slaves. Employees and customers will be protected from these things. I'll say more later.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you have a minute and a half.
Successors stand in the shoes of their predecessors. It's important to understand that what happens in the past in the city council continues on in the future. I got schooled early on when I first got elected because I wanted to stop the traffic circle at the bottom of Southway Avenue. And I was told, sure, you can do that. It's going to cost you $350,000 that we got to pay back to federal government. I learned quickly that we build on what successes of our prior council. I'm the only one up here talking about the real issues. He's talking about lawsuits. We have a city councilor who has tied us up and will be spending $100,000 or more on lawsuits. Elect this gentleman, that's your tax dollars, folks, your tax dollars. So you elect me, I'll tell you right now, the first thing I do is I take a pay cut, okay? I retain Alan Nygaard as our city manager. Let's go, let's hear the boos, let's go. Yeah, good job. And then on top of that, I keep Dan.
This is the way you talk to the people, the people who are going to elect you.
I'm sorry, can we not address one another directly during this portion? Thank you.
I'll retain Dan Marsh, and I retain all of the department heads. We have a good government, a functioning government that has moved Lewiston ahead in the 8 years that I have been here. I didn't bring COVID to the valley, and I can't solve the COVID problem.
Thank you. First question. It actually applies to all three, so you'll have equal amount of time to answer. What can you do as an elected mayor to encourage business to locate here? Mr. Johnson, you have a minute and a half.
Thank you, Mo. Well, that's a tough question because, you know, I have to say that I think this city's been working at trying to bring businesses here. You know, but the one thing that I've heard out on the street is folks say that it's very difficult doing business with the city of Lewiston, and they talk about the delays and the lack of communication that they have. So to me, that seems like a good place to start. I would tell you that I had a town hall, a meet and greet actually at Brackenbury Square last week, and had a very poor turnout from the businesses downtown. And so it's very hard to try to hone in on what it is we need to do to change things, to build confidence in our retail community when we don't have participation by some of these businesses. So I think it's very important that we hear from them so we can talk about, you know, what it is we need to support them to also attract new businesses. So that's a tough question. I don't have the silver bullet answer for that.
Mr. Boots, you have a minute and a half.
Yeah, I've got an answer for that. Okay, we need to start by overhauling community development. All right, the regulations are choking the businesses, choking the citizens, the building as well. Talk to the contractors, talk to anybody trying to do anything in this city. It's choking them to death. The regulation needs to be reduced. The taxes need to be reduced. Okay, Mr. Blakey likes to talk about the tax rate hasn't changed, or it's gone down the lowest since whenever you're saying it is, 80s. But everybody who gets a tax bill knows they're paying way more than they were. The assessed value went up. You can talk about your games and your numbers, but the reality, everybody here who owns a home, has your taxes not gone up by at least 30-40% in the last 2-3 years? You like that? Do you like that? No. So we got to cut red tape to get businesses here, and we need food production here particularly. Okay, we need to start having food manufacturing here again. And we need to cut the red tape and the taxes to get businesses to come here. And that's what we can do. Cut the regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you have a minute and a half.
Thank you. Through the city's budgeting process, we support several organizations whose their job is business development. I will continue to advocate funding Valley Vision, CETA, BDL, Chamber of Commerce, Valley Tourism Bureau. Those are the businesses that are responsible for bringing new business to our community. We hire them to represent us. You don't want one city or two city employees doing that. It'd be way too expensive. Mr. Boots talks about community development. What he fails to say is, a lot of those regulations, we don't get to pick and choose. Those are federal standards, fire standards, building codes, all set by international and national standards. We don't get to pick and choose and to ignore them. You talk about your taxes going up. Well, it's a double-edged sword. I doubt that anybody in this room has a home that's gone down in value. So it's tied directly to that. I'm hoping somewhere in this tonight's discussion, I get to talk about what I think in ways that we can reduce taxes, but I can't do it in the final few seconds.
Thank you. This next question is for all three candidates, submitted by Vicki Nostrand. What education and business experience do you have to effectively run a multi-million-dollar business? Mr. Johnson, you first.
I'm going to start all three of them. Okay. Well, most of my experience comes from my service in elected office at the Port of Lewiston and then also at the state of Idaho. And I've served on local government tax committees, judicial committees, transportation committee, ag committees, these kind of things that are important to our state, but also probably most importantly serving on what's called our Joint Finance Appropriations Committee. And on that committee, our job is to hear from the agencies and to set budgets, which is setting policy for the state of Idaho, much like what a city manager and a city council do today. When we write those budgets, really what we should be talking about is policy. What are the policies of the city going to be moving forward? And so I've spent 10 years in the Idaho legislature working on that, working on draft legislation, working on legislation that's passed to try to affect positive policy for the state of Idaho and set us in the right direction. And that takes teamwork, that takes all of us working together. So those are probably my prime experiences of doing that. I've been self-employed before, so I know the challenges of trying to pay the quarterly taxes and everything else that goes with that. So I think I can bring that small business owner perspective and my experience in the Idaho State Legislature to this position to do it well.
Thank you. Mr. Boots, you have a minute and a half.
I haven't talked a lot about this because I don't like to toot my own horn. I like to talk about other things, all right? But when I was 21 years old, I was promoted to meat manager at Costco Wholesale, all right? And dealing with millions of dollars of product for many years, managing, and I was actually the youngest in the chain to have held that position, all right? I've since moved on. I've done many other things. For now, I'm up at, and by the way, I've had a business. I've had a concrete business. I've probably done work for a number of you in this room, done some remodeling jobs over the years. Now I'm up at Washington State University. And I'll tell you what, I deal with people with the highest levels of education. Highest. And you wouldn't want some of them walking your dog, I promise you. Okay? That's the truth. So why does the president, why for the president, what are the requirements? That you're 35 years of age and that you're a natural born citizen. Why didn't our founding fathers put more requirements on that? Why? Because they knew that education and even bad experience, like the 10 years we've had out of Mr. Johnson, are not prerequisites for good leadership. That's the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you have a minute and a half.
Yes, can I have the question again? It's been a while since I heard it.
3 whole minutes. Let me grab the correct card. What education and business experience do you have to effectively run a multi-million-dollar business?
For 29 years, I worked for D.A. Davidson as a financial consultant, managing a portfolio of nearly $200 million for a number of families in this valley through good markets, bad markets, hard markets, easy markets. I've saw many of my clients retire in the style or in the way they wanted to retire. I was blessed with that experience. On top of that, I've had my 8 years experience in the city council, which has taught me a lot. But I'm no fool. I'm an old football coach. I understand to run effective government, I need to put people who are smarter than me around me. That's important. And I may be the only one up here who realizes that. You've got to surround yourself with qualified people who are smarter than you. And I intend to do that.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Bob Blakey, comes from Carrie Barney. As a current city councilor, you have voted for mask mandates twice. Due to your absence at the most recent mask mandate city council vote, please tell us how you would have voted had you not been absent. Well,
Good question. Thank you for asking it. And I make no bones about how I would have voted. In fact, we have a person in the back row who is running for city council. And right before that meeting, I texted her and I told her how I intended to vote. And my intention was to vote no. We have lost the mask mandate war. That's lost in America now. We have lost it. We have not lost the vaccination war. It is a shame. It is a shame when a country like Cambodia has a higher vaccination rate than we do in this country. Something's wrong with that picture. I'm done.
Are you done? Thank you. I'm actually, since we have a pretty good stack of questions, the individual ones I'm going to just direct. This next one is from Loretta Ty to Wilson Boots. Can we as business owners and citizens expect negative press, as you have done to Senator Johnson, when you are in disagreement with us? And why do you think you should be in charge of our medical decisions?
Well, actually, Loretta, I'm actually wanting to give you the freedom to make your own medical decisions. I'm not sure why that's so difficult to understand. And no, as a business owner, definitely not give you negative press. The difference is Dan Johnson has been in the Senate. This is part of the job. Just like if I'm mayor, part of the job, people are going to criticize me. I'm not elected. I get criticized a lot. I can take it. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, all right? And I think Dan Johnson should resign. He's been a failed senator for 10 years, F-rated. We don't accept F grades from our children. How many parents here would accept a year of F grades from their kids? 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. Enough is enough. I just want people to know the truth. If they like what Dan Johnson votes for, then by all means, vote for him, but know what you're voting for. I'm the only one that's saying I'm going to stand up and fight for your individual liberties. And if we don't have personal freedom, we have nothing. All the money in the world won't matter.
Thank you. I hate to say it, I would like, if it's possible, if we could hold the applause till the end of the section, it would be beneficial and we can get through more questions. This next one is for Dan. Mr. Johnson, what is your opinion of the Union Gospel Mission moving onto Snake River Avenue?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I have an opinion per se, but I did meet with some executive board members, and they explained to me what a high barrier program is, and it sounds like a very successful program. And it sounds like they're making a difference in people's lives and they're making change. So I think that's very positive. You know, I've been asked to go up to Spokane and tour the facility up there. I'll do that on my next trip up to Spokane. I think maybe the question, they're asking for more, and they didn't ask for more. They just asked for my opinion on that. But I know that there's some concern about expanding that to a 100-bed facility. That's my understanding of that. And there's some changes to the code that may need to be made or have been made. I don't really know. But whether or not that's a good fit for our city. So I guess I would say this, all cities are going to have you know, homeless issues, and we have to address them. We can't ignore them. We just have to find good policies that, you know, fit in with the community and don't make that situation worse than it is. So, you know, again, on something like that, you know, city council has to look at that. They have to make decisions on that. The mayor's involved, you know, probably again through political advocacy and trying to work with the business owners and constituents and residents of the city that may or may not want a low barrier or a high barrier facility in their neighborhoods. So, you know, the opinion is, it sounds like they're a good operation. You know, if there were some changes at the city, I'd have to get more information on that.
Thank you. This next question is directed at you, Mr. Blakey. Since you are running for mayor and city council, does this mean you no longer have confidence in the current city council structure, or are you running to hedge your political bets? And that question comes from John Immel.
No, absolutely not. It says it all right here. I support Proposition 1. I want you to vote yes. I don't want to change the form of government. But if the majority of the citizens in Lewiston want to change the form of government, then I believe I'm the most qualified of the three candidates. I'm the only one who's talking about important issues. I hear we talk about mask mandates and vaccines, and Dan does a pretty good job. I give him credit for all the work that he does down there. It's a hard job you got down in Boise. Folks, I said it once and I'll say it again. You wake up in the morning and you want your water on. You want your sewer to work. I sound like I'm beating a dead horse when I say that. Those are the real issues. You want to make sure we continue to keep the city of Lewiston competitive in the future. Don't throw us back into the Stone Age. I'm done.
Thank you. This next question is for Wilson. What role is the planning and zoning departments playing in discouraging retail businesses from moving into Lewiston?
Well, if you talk to business owners that have tried to start businesses here and they try to remodel existing building and to bring it up to the codes that the city wants, some of these people have said would take up to $100,000 to bring a small building up to code for the city. So those regulations and the time it takes 6 months, which has already been mentioned, takes 6 months, up to 6 months to go through the process in the city of Lewiston. So people go over to Clarkson and 30 days later, they're running a business. It needs to be streamlined, all right? And that's why when we have a direct elected mayor, I can take care of these things much quicker and get it on the agenda. When they talked about the control of the agenda, Mr. Pernsteiner, that was given over in 2018. The council voted to give control of setting the agenda over to the city manager. So there is not that much accountability and control. Technically they have it, but they've been more than happy to give it over. And it's just gotten out of control, and it continues to go out of control.
Thank you. My next question is addressed to all three of you. You'll have 1.5 minutes apiece. If you had to vote for one of your opponents currently on the stage, who would it be and why? Mr. Johnson, you have 1.5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mo. Yeah, we have to have fun too. We can't take this too serious. You know, I have to say that I appreciate the passion that Mr. Boots brings to the job. I actually don't agree with him on some things, but I'm just not able to communicate with him because his platform seems to be one of anger. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to work with somebody who's angry all the time. And, you know, that would be very hard. But again, I try. Mr. Blakey and I have known each other for a little bit longer, did some work together on the football field, and then when I was a city employee, I had to work with him too. Based on what I heard tonight, and if I had to choose between one or the other, I think I could very confidently say that I would support Mr. Blakey. And I think for the reasons that he has shared with us tonight, you know, his experience on city council and his work on city issue, I think he has a full understanding of some of the pertinent issues here in the city. And I'm just not confident that Mr. Wilson is up to speed and he could do that.
Thank you. Mr. Boots, you have a minute and a half.
I'll tell you, I am angry, and I'm wondering why the hell these two guys aren't. Okay, we're losing our country and we're losing our rights. And so, you know what? We should be angry. If I had to choose, it's actually not even an issue because we do have a recall process I already talked about, right? I would vote for Bob Blakey. And the reason that is because at least he's a registered Democrat and he's honest about his positions. Although I agree with 95%, I disagree with 95% of what Bob says. At least he's honest and sincere about where he's at. The problem I have with Mr. Johnson is he votes like a Democrat, but he's registered as a Republican, and that's deceiving the voters, and I don't like that. I like straightforward, honest, straightforward politicians.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you have a minute and a half.
During my 8 years on City Council, I have been the AIC, Association of Idaho Cities representative for the city. So I've made many trips to Boise. I've spent time with Dan Johnson, Mike Kingsley, former representative. Oh, I'm having a brain. Sarah Stevenson, thank you very much. I did not spend any time with the person who replaced her. I admire all those people who go down to Boise. That is a hard job. You are in the limelight all the time. It's a tough position. You get graded. Do I agree with the grading system? Absolutely not. I'm pretty sure that if they were grading me, I would have an F2. Okay? You know what? That means you're trying to do something for the good of the state. That's what that F means. It means you are trying to advance a platform to make the state a better place. And Dan, I have not agreed with everything that he's ever voted on, but I have found him to be receptive and replies to emails, and I would vote for Dan Johnson.
Thank you. This next question will be spread around to all of you, so you'll have equal time to answer. At what level is your support for the Lewiston-Nez Perce County Regional Airport? Mr. Johnson, you have a minute and a half.
Well, thank you, Mo. You know, I don't think we can say enough about the role of the regional airport in our community and its connection to the rest of the world and the economic development, the opportunities that it brings to this community. And I know we have some members from the airport here tonight, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. And I saw Commissioner Havens earlier, and I think he and the other commissioners get credit for their role in that too. You know, with the addition of another flight to Lewiston here, United Airlines, I think really the possibilities for Lewiston are limitless. When you can jump on an airplane and leave Lewiston, fly to Denver, and get down to Costa Rica in one day, leave at breakfast time here and be in Costa Rica for dinner, that's pretty good. That's quite a connection to the rest of the world. And so I think really what it plays too is it plays an important role when we talk about recruiting new businesses to town. It's important that way. It's important for recruiting things like medical care, doctors to the community, these kind of things. They need to have access to that. We have a lot of businesses today that fly in and out of the airport and go to places like Alaska. So I think there's a lot more happening there than we realize. And it's only recently when we've really elevated that in the public's eye where we've been able to benefit from that. And I sure hope that's something, we may not all agree tonight, but I hope that's one thing we can all agree on, is that we have to keep that airport and build it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boots, you have a minute and a half.
Yeah, we need a viable airport, there's no doubt about it. And there's been a lot of problems up at the airport. We've read a lot about it. I don't know, I know some of the details, but I haven't been intimately involved with that. So, like I said, I support a strong airport. I hope they're on the way to getting out of some of the troubles that there's been in the last few years. There's a few things that I'm not thrilled about. I wasn't thrilled about United, and I'll tell you why. Because they were the first company to start requiring their pilots, employees to have vaccine mandates. And so, you know, I think it matters the companies that we try to bring in here. And I think that should have been looked at a little bit more. Rather, the county decided to spend $4 million on that. That's their decision. I'd want to look a little bit closer at that and what the policies are of an airline that comes in. But I am glad we're growing, and hopefully United, maybe some pilots like Southwest did, maybe United pilots will do that and get them cracking and get them straightened out too. So anyhow.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you also have a minute and a half.
Thank you. My voting record indicates that I have supported the airport for 8 years that I have been on the city council. I have never voted no against funding the airport, and I will continue to vote yes for funding the airport. But I want to go in a different direction real quickly. I applaud Commissioner Havens for using some of, I'll call it the COVID dollars, to fund the initial payment for United Airlines. And why do I say that? Because one, it didn't come out of your pockets directly. Currently, the way we run our government, if the city decides to give $100,000 to the airport and the county gives $100,000 to the airport, you, the city residents, pay twice. You're taxed twice on that. You're taxed on your city taxes, and then you get taxed on the county taxes, okay? The person who lives in Peck gets taxed once. And that's just not the airport. It's all kinds of issues up and down the line. We need to take a hard look. You, the taxpayers, need to elect officials who are going to take a hard look at that and change the way that we fund county operations, because it is not fair for you to be taxed twice. You want to bring taxes down? Let's address that issue.
Thank you. This next question is also for all three. Lewiston is very isolated, which makes it very susceptible to chain and food security problems. What plans do you have to protect the people from the failures of the national supply chain and facilitate local production? Mr. Johnson, you first, a minute and a half.
Well, thank you, Mo. I guess I just have to say I probably have to do more thinking than responding on that, because I don't know, understanding some of the supply chain issues that we're facing. Southern Idaho is very big into agriculture, and they have access to things that we don't have, for example, an interstate, which is very detrimental to our community in terms of moving products. And at the Port of Lewiston, where we've done our darndest to keep that shipping lane open, we continue to face issues down in Portland at the terminal there, and that's really what kind of blocks some of the trade that could come up and down that river. We do have the barge system that allows us to export our wheat down, so certainly we'd have to maintain that, work to keep our dams in place, very important for this community. So, outside of that, we have to look at ways probably to add value to what we have. So a good example in Idaho is down in the Twin Falls area, where they have a lot of cows, a lot of dairy cows. They produce a lot of milk and dairy products, and a few years ago they attracted Chobani there. And have added some value to that process, what they do with the milk. So I think what we have to do is we have to look at the products that we grow in this area and see if we can add value to that, and then, provide some security, at least for the region that way, if we can do that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Boots, you have a minute and a half.
So I'm the only one that's been talking about this issue. Okay, this is a very real issue that we are dealing with today. All right, the supply chain that's happening, the problems are the shipping right now. That's the issue right now, the shipping, the ports, and they're all backed up. Okay, this is in national news. It's been in national news. And I was concerned a year and a half ago when this started, when we ran out of toilet paper in Lewiston, Idaho. If you can run out of toilet paper in Lewiston, Idaho, there's a problem, and it's not manufacturing. How many paper makers do we have here, toilet paper? How many people here working out the mill? Yep, I see a number of you. Okay, we make it here. The problem is the supply chain. And it's one thing to run out of toilet paper or clothes, but if we run out of food, folks, and don't think it can't happen, we'd better prepare now before there's an emergency. We need to set up food manufacturing, and I have a plan for this, okay, to bring in food manufacturers with tax incentives to come into Lewiston and to use items from our region. For example, wheat and the grains for flour, for example, for pasta. We need to be prepared to be able to feed ourselves. We cannot depend on items that we have to live on being shipped in here. We need to become more independent. And I think if we look on what's going on in the world right now, that has become very obvious. And this is a pressing matter. This is not something to ignore, and we need to deal with it before the emergency.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you also have a minute and a half.
Thank you. Mr. Duger's out there in the crowd, and he knows my position on dams. I support the dams today. I support the dams tomorrow. I support the dams next year. I can't say that I won't change my mind 5-10 years from now. Technology may make those dams obsolete. We need to keep them in place. What can we do as a city? We can continue to work with our state legislators and our federal representatives to continue to get 4-lane roads into get 95 4 lanes to Coeur d'Alene. That's going to make shipping to the city much easier. We need to work on projects like that. We don't campaign on fear. There was no shortage of toilet paper. We just decided to hoard toilet paper. We hoarded water. We hoarded all kinds of things. And I'm just as guilty. You know, I got 10,000 rounds of .22 ammunition in my basement. I'll never shoot it in my whole lifetime, but I hoarded it. And I think a lot of you out there nod your heads and say, you're in the same boat, okay? It's hoarding. There's not a shortage, okay? But it's the fear-mongering that goes around that makes us feel fearful. Fear itself makes you fearful.
Thank you. This next question is also to all three. With the cost rising in infrastructure around the region, how can you expect for needs by cutting taxes? Mr. Johnson?
I couldn't hear the question.
I'm sorry. With the cost rising in infrastructure around the region, how can you expect to pay for need with cutting taxes?
Pay for what?
To pay for the infrastructure and the needs of growth of infrastructure, while also cutting taxes.
Okay, I got that part. Now reread it, please.
I know, it's not very well worded. Let me kind of break it down. So this individual is wondering how we're going to continue to cover infrastructure projects that are rising in cost and simultaneously cut taxes to the citizens.
Well, thank you, Mo. So I presume the infrastructure we're talking about is capital projects at the city of Lewiston. I don't know we would talk about any other projects. And so those costs are going up, and taxes are going up, and other things. So one example, and I don't know if this is even feasible, but it's certainly a question that I would ask. I serve on the Idaho Bond Bank Authority, and one of the things that we do is we pool money across the state. We use the state's credit rating to try to find cheaper money for communities. And we've done some very positive things over the years. We helped a hospital recently up in St. Mary's, saved quite a bit of money on their bonds, and Grangeville recently went through some changes. So I think it's those kind of opportunities, if they're out there, where we can try to restructure our finance or bonds, financing for bonds, things like that, to try to stretch that dollar out a little bit, if you will. Fees on like our enterprise funds, things like that. I think you just have to really stay on top of those things and try to manage those as best you can. When I worked at the city and worked in the solid waste division, I thought we did that very effectively. We built up very nice reserves. by being very strict in our contract management, but also doing some new things like out at the transfer station where we had recycling programs and things like that to cut costs. So you just have to manage it. It takes a lot of management. Anybody that's worked in that would understand that.
Thank you. Mr. Boots?
So the key to cutting taxes and really it's the same answer, and paying for infrastructure is growth. Okay, we have to have the right kind of growth, not just people moving in from outside the area. We need to get more manufacturing here like I've talked about, and in order to do that, we have to cut the red tape. The city has become bloated and the ordinances are over the top. I mean, even down to, and I know this is on a homeowner's issue, but a lot of people talk about this, that they can't build the shop they want because the city, it's a relation between the ratio of your house to your shop. So what? If you have the property to do it and you want to have a 1,000 square foot house and you want a 5,000 square foot shop, good for you. It's America. Who cares, right? Would you like the freedom to be able to build the size of shop you'd like? So I'm about liberty at all levels. And so getting back, but growth is the key.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey?
Thank you. I've been waiting for this question. How do we fund infrastructure and at the same time reduce your taxes? Well, there are 6 ways. I hope I have a chance to get them all out. We need to have local option taxing. We need to have the ability to have you vote on local options and local projects. Currently, our state legislature does not give us that authority here in the city. We need to increase the homeowner's exemption. At one time, it was indexed to inflation, and then it was frozen, and then bumped to 125. You raise the exemption on your homeowners, that's going to lower your taxes. Did you know that we don't get any of the sales tax revenue from internet sales? With internet sales becoming so important in today's economy, our city does not share in any of that revenue and the revenue sharing. It needs to change. And fund our schools appropriately. If we fund our schools appropriately at the state level, that means the school districts do not have to rely on supplemental bond levies, which again will lower your taxes. We need a hospitality fee. How many of you traveled out of town and have paid $1 or $2 on your hotel room? We don't have that in Lewiston. We need the voters to put that in place. That's a couple $100,000s of income left on the table. And then last but least, I said, we need to change the way you pay your taxes. As a citizen of the city of Lewiston, you should not be paying twice for county services. Once is enough.
Thank you. The next question is also for all 3. If elected, do you intend to implement any mask or vaccine mandates? Please give your answer, yes or no, and your reasonings behind it. Mr. Johnson, you have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mo. I'll take about 15 seconds. I'm not a supporter of mandates. I don't think they work, and they, even from the very beginning, when you looked at President Trump, I guess, is one who first showed this graph, but they talked about trying to flatten the curve. And I got a copy of that study. I thought, well, I'll read the study, see what the study says. And it says right in there that mandates don't work. And we lost track of that over time, and we went to these mandates, and it's just a bad way to go. So I believe that it's a personal choice. I'm not offended if somebody wears a mask. If I wear a mask, nobody should be offended either. And the same thing with the vaccines. I understand the concerns that folks have with that, and again, I think it's a choice whether or not to do that. I think we all understand that there's consequences with all the choices we make, and so we just have to be willing to accept the consequences.
Thank you. Mr. Boots, you have 1.5 minutes.
I agree with what Mr. Johnson just said there, but the problem is there's talk and then there's action, because Mr. Johnson has not stood up to protect the citizens of the state. The state, Montana's done it. Texas is starting to do some things, Florida, to protect the citizens, and Mr. Johnson has not, and he voted against giving the Senate the ability to call themselves back into session to deal with emergency orders. So, you know, I don't know why he voted against that. He has his reasons, but I also want to make a mention here, because I'm real clear. I'm the only one that's been really clear on this, because Mr. Johnson hasn't even mentioned it He finally mentioned the mandates the other day as far as the vaccine mandates. It's not on his issues at all. But he did vote against raising the homeowner's exemption, so on taxes. So that would have cut your taxes some. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you have a minute and a half.
I voted yes for the mask mandate. You all know that. And I'm proud of my vote. And had I not been out of town on a vacation when it came up for a recent discussion, I had planned to vote no. We have lost the mask war. You've heard me say that already. We have lost the mask war in the United States. Have we lost the vaccine? I'm not sure. Am I for mandates? No, I'm not. I'm not for mandates. I'm not for a vaccine mandate. But as an elected city officials, make it clear, if our Governor Little, and our state legislature, or Governor Little on his own, decided that there was going to be a statewide mandate, I'm obligated as an elected official to follow the instructions of our state governor. I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think he plans on doing it. And personally, I hope he never does.
Thank you. The next question is to all three as well. We have a great history of recreation in the Lewiston area. What will you do to promote our area and get more of the tourist and travel dollars? Mr. Johnson, you have a minute and a half.
Well, I think certainly we have a target-rich community here for recreation opportunities, from our backcountry to our rivers to our parks here in the valley, and I think that's what draws people here. So I think that's an area that we can certainly help promote. We have some great community partners in the valley here to work with to do that. If we're talking about recreation opportunities within city limits, again, I'm going to direct you back to the budget. When we set budgets, we're trying to basically fund policy. So council has to set that, and they have to set that policy, and then they have to fund it. And, from what I've read in some of the publications at the city, it looks like maybe we need to prioritize some of that spending, because I don't think we have the money to do it all. But I think connected with that, something that's very important is that if we start to look at the demographics of our community and across the country, really, it's going to happen here in Lewiston. We've got a young group of people, the millennials, that are coming up behind us, and pretty soon they are going to be our future. And we need to find ways to make this community attractive, provide those opportunities for the folks that are in that age group so that they'll stay here, they'll work here, and they'll recreate here. So I think we need to engage with those folks, and we need to chart a future that can build up on those opportunities.
Thank you. Mr. Boots?
So, I think recreation here drives itself. I don't see that as a problem, and quite frankly, I've got a lot bigger fish to fry, okay? People come here to recreate, and they're going to continue to. And so if we can get out of the way of businesses and let them do what they do, people will have businesses to supply recreation for people, and that will be great, and I love it, okay? But we have affordable housing issues, okay? We don't have affordable housing for our working class people, for families starting out. The rental market is stuffed, right? And what happens? You build these big homes that people from outside the area with a lot of money come in and snatch them up, and so we have families stuck in the rental market. That's what's going on right now. We need to change the zoning and allow for more condensed areas of housing and simple starter homes. I'm not talking low income, I'm talking affordable, all right? And we need to do that for our working families so people can transition out of the rental market and own their homes. And that's a real problem right now in Lewiston, a real problem.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey?
If you've never taken the time to introduce yourself to Michelle Peters, you should. Michelle is in charge of our LC Valley Tourism Bureau. We fund that $15,000 a year. I met with her last week. She said our $15,000 brought in almost $100,000 in grants. That was the purpose of us funding them, to use it for grant opportunities. She'll tell you how many requests we get for tourist information monthly, daily, yearly, and the numbers will blow you away. I recently had an opportunity to go on a vacation. I rode my bike across the state of Missouri, 230 some odd miles. Wonderful time. A gentleman on our trip, a very wealthy gentleman, was on a tour boat trip. He came up from Portland to Lewiston. He said to me, I can't believe that was hands down the best vacation I have ever taken, and I have vacated all over the world, and I will be back. You can't put a price tag on that type of publicity. That is what we need to promote, is our tourism, our people coming to our valley and constantly reminding them how beautiful it is here, and cherish it and protect it.
Thank you. This next question is directed at Mr. Boots. What is your plan to bring more business, including retail, into Lewiston?
Well, I've partly covered that already, but get rid of the regulation, number one. And so, that is the key to everything, all right? And if you have manufacturers here and we build up more manufacturing, then you're going to have retail that comes in. And if you can cut the taxes and cut the red tape it takes for them to get started, then they're going to come. They want to sell to people. The problem they haven't been coming here is because Lewiston's tough to deal with. That's why they keep going across the river. So that's what we have to change, and that starts at community development. That needs to be overhauled.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, the next question is directed at you. Have city taxes gone up while you have been on city council?
Yes and no. Yes and no. A year ago, we took advantage of the governor's program, and we used his funding to reduce your taxes by 12%. Your county representative did not do that. They had an opportunity to, they chose not to do that. We did. This past year, because of budgeting, we've been able to keep our levy in check. Our levy ultimately determines what you pay in taxes, and it's the lowest level since 1985. Do our taxes go down every year? No. Don't forget, folks, the property that you live in, your homes have gone up in value. There's the driving value. There, right there is what's driving the issue. Many of you can't believe that your houses are worth $200,000 and $300,000 more than what you paid for them. You would never think of that in your life. So don't confuse taxes and appreciation in real estate. We can't control that, nor can the county. The assessor can't control what your property is worth. He's just doing his job, and he's telling you what it's worth.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, next question goes to you. Why did you vote against the bill banning biological boys from participating in girls' sports?
Well, thank you for that question. So that was House Bill 500 from last year's session 2020, and I did vote against the bill. And the reason why I voted against the bill, because it had some language in it that was not constitutional. Shortly after that bill was passed, a federal judge did a preliminary injunction, he preliminarily enjoined that bill, and today it's not in effect. It never took effect. That judge was nominated by President Trump, confirmed by the Senate on a 100-0 vote. And he said this bill is likely unconstitutional. It was sent to the district court in San Francisco. It's still in the court system. It's got an unconstitutional language in it. I can't vote for bills that are unconstitutional. And in fact, what I will tell you, and I will challenge you this, you want the truth, go look at my record. I probably have the highest constitutional voting record of any legislator. I see you shaking your head, but you go look it up. If you're afraid of the truth, then don't go look it up. So all this talk about that, it's just meant to lead you down a path to think something negative about me or whatever, but there's nothing truthful in that. I voted against the bill, but what this rumor is about, there's no truth to it. It's unconstitutional. I will not vote for bills that are unconstitutional, and I stand by my record.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Mr. Boots. You've talked about lowering city taxes. How precisely do you intend to do that?
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity for a moment and address what he just said, because your voting is convoluted, because there's plenty of rulings by the Supreme Court that says, for example, abortion is legal. So does that mean that you vote for abortion bills? No. So, you know, which is it? You can't just pick and choose. Sometimes you have to just stand up for what is right, regardless of whether it's going to be labeled by a judge unconstitutional. The reason we have elected people like you is to stand in the gap against the judiciary and actually stand up for us. We don't want to be ruled by the Supreme Court. And there's places in this country that the Second Amendment has been ruled, you know, that it's not for the personal individual right to own a firearm. They've been fighting over that for years, right? But I want people to support that and stand up for us. And so you've been both back and forth on it. So that's a lousy excuse in my book. You should have voted, and most of the other Republicans voted it. You have an F rating, and you have an F rating for a reason. And it's not because you're a good senator.
Wilson, are you going to address the actual question?
I believe he's used his time.
Yes. This next question is directed to you, Bob. You're currently running for mayor, but yet you support Proposition 1. Isn't that being hypocritical?
Hell no. I told you my position. I've never hid behind my position. My position has been from day one. I support Proposition 1. Vote yes. Hypocritical would be me saying, well, maybe yes, maybe no. I'm proud to wear this up here. I'm proud to have that on my advertising. I'm proud to the fact that I want to keep our current form of government. I am not a hypocrite. But if the voters decide they want to make a change, there is no doubt in my mind, having spent now the last 30, 40 minutes up here, I am the most qualified candidate, because I am the only one who understands the real issues of how to run a city and how to keep it competitive. How to keep our city competitive in the future. No one's talking about that. Just me. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have time for one final question. This is going to be directed to all three of you. What is your opinion on the proper use of enterprise funds? Mr. Blakey, you first.
Oh, interesting question. Probably Mr. Bradbury wrote that one. Enterprise funds. I suspect a vast majority of you out there have no idea what enterprise funds are. We have a city budget. Our budget is nearly, if you take out capital expenses for the water and sewer plant, it's give or take $60 million. I don't know if you realize that 80% of that budget goes to support police and fire protection. So the other 20% doesn't leave a lot on the bones for picking to run your city. Okay, enterprise funds are the funds that we collect separately to ensure road building, sewers, water, sanitation. By law, we are not allowed to commingle those funds, nor by law are we allowed to borrow from those funds. Those funds are protected funds, and they have to be used in the future for development of said projects from whatever category they fall under. So enterprise funds are vastly important. What I find interesting is we are the only city in Idaho that doesn't allow your council to use those excess funds for other projects. So we walk around with a set of handcuffs on our arms and hands that other cities in the state do not have.
Can I add my own follow-up question to that?
I think that's fair.
I think it seems reasonable. Based on that stating that Lewiston is the only city in Idaho with handcuffs on those funds, who dictates that?
Who dictates what?
Who dictates the policy that the city of Lewiston is handcuffed on those funds?
Oh, interesting question that you bring to me. The voters did. The voters did. And you know what? We've honored that. Do I agree with it? No. You know what? when you have a city government, you don't want to have 6 or 7 people all in line towing and saying the same thing. You need diversity in your government to make it work. If everybody's agreeing with me 100%, something's wrong. And so the voters did that for us. And since they did, we have followed their instructions.
Thank you. Mr. Boots?
Yeah, I'd like to actually address that, what you just mentioned, because the reason the voters did that, I'm sure all of you that were here remember, was because the city tried to illegally shove the library down our throats and took money from other departments and illegally loaned it, and the voters had enough. And this is part of the reason Mr. Bradbury, and I agree with him on these points. We disagree on the mandates, we disagree on different liberty issues, but on the monetary issues, if I'm elected, I actually hope Mr. Bradbury as a citizen, because that's what I refer him as, I don't want him to have power on the council with his anti-liberty views, but I hope he will work with me to get to the bottom of the financial issues in the city. So.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Well, certainly enterprise funds are used to fund businesses of the city. They're separate from tax, from general fund dollars that the city takes in. And if you pay for a service such as garbage or sewer water, then you would expect that the fees that you pay go to for providing and maintaining that service and for nothing else. And so to mix those dollars into other funds is not proper, it's not legal. And, you know, it's my opinion, when I worked at the city and today, that sometimes we don't always do that as good as we can. And, you know, that might sound like criticism, it might sound like a cheap shot standing up here at the microphone, but I can back it up, and I know that I can. And so as mayor, it would be my goal to make sure that we really ratchet that down and we do the best job we can so that we're only paying for the costs that are allowed within these enterprise funds, you know, and then, you know, set the rates accordingly. Maybe the rates would go down, who knows?
Thank you. This concludes the question and answer period. Each candidate is now going to have a 3-minute closing statement. Mr. Johnson will start us off. Mr. Johnson, you have 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mo, and I'm going to try to do this quickly. So a couple of quick things that I must say. Just when we talk about being a candidate running for office, I'm going to show you my business card here as an example. If you go look at our campaign expenditure reports, I'm the only candidate who spends all of his money in Lewiston. So if you're another candidate and you spend your money outside of Lewiston, how can you run for mayor if you don't really believe in the community that you want to serve? Spend your money local. That really sends a strong message. The only candidate that's doing that. Secondly, I want to take a quick comment here of my precious seconds. If the Lewiston Morning Tribune is here tonight, I presume they are somewhere, are they? They're not here, okay. Well, let me just tell you, they had an article in the paper today, and in that article, and I quote, it says, the city's chief executive officer who will preside over 6 council members. That's not true. The mayor does not preside over the council members. The mayor presides over the meetings of the city council, and there's a big difference in that. And this is part of when we communicate to the public. I mean, if I read that in the paper, I'd say, why would I vote for a strong mayor? The strong mayor is going to preside over the city councilors. That's not true. There's a separation. I talked about that, the separate branches. And so, you know, Lewiston Morning Tribune, if you're listening, please correct it in your newspaper and try to be truthful in that. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I picked up on that and I didn't like it. Then I'm just going to say very quickly, you know, I got asked the question on the transgender thing, that's fine. But I took an oath as an Idaho State Senator to uphold the U.S. Constitution and the Idaho Constitution. And that's what I have to do. I can't pick and choose which bills I'm going to say I want to do or not do. If I know it's going to head to court, I can't support it. It's unconstitutional. It's a very simple statement. It has nothing about my values on it. And so one man's opinion on that or his wishful thinking is not the truth. And so I would challenge you, if you have questions, you can call me, you can email me, you can text me. I know you can do that, and I will provide that for you. There's nothing to hide there. And then lastly, just very briefly, I think we all agree that change is needed at our city, you know, and on both sides, I think probably agree to that. And my position is that I think an elected mayor is that agent of change. I think that we can bring some very positive results for our city, and I want to be that mayor. I want to help bring those changes to the city. And then again, working with everybody within our community, those who maybe don't support this, we'll have to work with them afterwards. Certainly our city employees are going to be a valuable resource for us, and we have to work for them. But then our community members too. I just think we have so many opportunities here to work together to make this community a much better place. And I would tell you, win or lose, yes or no, I'm all in, and I will support our town, our city of Lewiston. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all the city employees. They are underrated, their services. They work hard every day. They show up on time. They do their jobs. I want to thank our first responders, our police force, our firefighters. Having had to use the firefighters here a month ago after I had a surgery and I got stuck on a couch, I was pretty embarrassed to call them. Within 5 minutes, they were at my house. Thank you, firefighters. Okay, you want to make change? This process we're going through right now is foolish. Let me say that. You really want to make real change in the city government? Vote me out. But how do you do that? How do you vote me out when it's a horse race? Down in Boise, they laugh at our election system here. It's a popularity contest. The top 4 win. You get 11 people, gosh, know what you're going to get for 3rd and 4th place. Okay? What we need, and I had advocated this, but it falls on deaf ears, is we need to assign numbers to our seats, 1 through 7. Okay? Let's say I'm seat number 1. Now, if Hannah Letke wants to boot me, she can run directly against me. If Gabe over there has a problem with my voting record, he has plenty of opportunity to make my voting record public and talk about it. Right now, we don't do that. It's just a popularity contest. We put up signs, we pay some advertising. No, vote on people's voting records, and we can make change, and we need to assign numbers to all of us. And then you can vote against an individual. We can line up and vote against Bob Blakey if you choose to. Okay? I encourage, that's how we make real change in government. It's not what we're doing right now. This is window dressing. This is icing. Make my voting record public and use it for me, use it against me. There's how we get change every 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boots, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement.
Well, I totally disagree with what Bob just said there, because this isn't window dressing. This is politics at its best. This is Americans voicing their concerns and letting their voice be heard. Why are we doing this? Because we were shut out of the city council because they violated open meeting law 6 times in as many months, and nothing was done. There was no penalties. And Mr. Blakey sat there and was involved with it. He's responsible, okay? He is responsible for the city the way we have it now. Now, he thinks that's good. I don't, okay? And so I think that needs to change. And we had 2,000, we needed 815 signatures for to get Prop 1 on the ballot. We had almost 2,000 signatures in 6 weeks. That was almost 50% of the people that voted in the last city election. I really hope we have high involvement this time. Regardless of what you think, how you feel, that I hope people will get out, get involved, and vote, because this is the best opportunity we've had in years to make real changes in city government. And the real question you have to ask yourself, will the 2 politicians that have given us our current problems, will they fix the problems they've created? I don't think so. I think it's time for a working man's perspective, no nonsense, no BS. We'll take the bull by the horns and get the job done. And I'll work for you, and I'll work with you, and I'll work with the city employees and the department heads that will work for us. And the city employees, police, fire, any employees, you will not be told you need to wear masks or get vaccines. That is your own personal choice, and it will end there. And you have my promise on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do want to add one small correction, Wilson. It only took us 2.5 weeks to get those signatures. This is going to conclude the mayoral section of our forum. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Blakey, and Mr. Boots, I'd like to thank you all for participating tonight and your willingness to step forward to serve Lewiston as its mayor. Let's give these candidates a big round of applause. And let's also remember that the only way one of these candidates becomes the next mayor of Lewiston is if no on Proposition 1 wins November 2nd. This will also conclude our live stream portion of the Proposition 1 and Candidate Forum. We'd like to thank everyone who's joined us over the internet. A link to